everybody, and welcome to another episode of Operation Moonsucker. This is a stacked one. You may have already noticed a running length of 20 minutes, and yes, we're going to experience quite a bit of adventure this time. But first, before we can do that, we have to get the crew to the hauler. Yes, we are heading out to the moon. And in order to do that, we deliver the crew via a small crew SSTO, as you can see here. We're already in the upper parts of the atmosphere. Scratch that, we're already in outer space, or at least out of the atmosphere. Now it's time to burn at our apoapse to circularize, and then of course rendezvous with the big freighter or hauler. Just another beauty shot of that tiny little spacecraft. You can see here the solar panels are extended, so we don't have any problems regarding electricity. Alright, there it is, our big ship, the hauler, that will get the rest of the equipment to our moon base in order to finish it and get all the equipment onto the surface to create some fuel for, yes, we still have that goal, replenish my refueling station, the France. But before we can do that, of course, the crew has to enter the main vehicle. But then I realized I had a little problem. And the problem was I placed the docking port in a very aesthetically pleasing position on the SSTO, but yeah, that did mean it did not fit on the main docking port of the ship. Well, good thing all of that big tanks have some docking ports on them, so I thought maybe those would fit, but no! I put them in such a position that it was not possible to dock my little space fighter. And yeah, so the crew had to take a little EVA action in order to transfer to the main ship. Which you can see, of course, here. Alright, we're going to transfer an engineer, a pilot, scratch that, 2 pilots and 2 engineers. One pilot is going to pilot the hauler, even though it is autonomous, or well, remote controlled, as somebody nicely corrected me in one of the previous episodes. But before we can see the departure of the hauler, we of course have to get our crew SSTO back onto the surface. We're already on our approach to the runway, and the space plane is behaving nicely. There we go, landing confirmed. Alright, this is looking fine. Now, back to space. Back in space, the hauler is heading to the moon, of course, where its destination lies. But before we do that, let's take a final look at that marvelous piece of equipment before its many nuclear engines fire. Why am I using nuclear engines when I'm not going interplanetary? Well, the reason being is that those things are highly efficient, and I plan to carry a lot of fuel from lunar orbit to the France. And I intend to do this not just once, but many times. Alright, while the hauler is on its way, I thought, well, this might be a good opportunity to finish some of the operations still pending on the surface of the moon. So we see the squid tug here disengaging from the spine, my collector station in orbit around the moon. And then of course we put the tank onto the carry hall, and the carry hall is going to land on the surface. And well, I almost made a bit of a mess out of it, as you can see here. That ridge was really too close for comfort, to be honest. Okay, heading to the base, we still have a lot of fuel left. And those nice little lights at the bottom of the carry hull show us where we're going to set it down. This is going to come in handy once the base is on the night side of the moon. Since the moon is as the moon of Earth, since the moon of Kerbin is tightly locked to its main planet, it faces the same side to it all the way. So this means that the day-night cycles on the moon are really long. Okay, well, really long, it's not 5 hours as Kerbin. Okay, docking the tank onto the rig. Come on, get in there. Alright. Okay, we're going to transfer a little bit of fuel and refuel the carry hull, and once we've done that, we're going to get back into orbit and finish what we've started. But first, the hauler has arrived. There it is. Hi there. And of course it has to capture itself around the moon so we don't lose our trajectory. Okay, this is looking fine. And we are in orbit around the moon. Now it's time to get the right plane so we get an encounter with the rig. So the plan is to dock the hauler to the rig. No, not the rig, of course, the spine. And while we wait for our maneuver node, we check out the interior. There is the crew. And they're looking exciting, aren't they? Okay, back on the surface, we have finished our operations there. We have, of course, had to wait until the hauler has finished its maneuver, otherwise it would have shot off into space somewhere. And now, of course, it's time to get back to the spine. And as you can see here, I've got a nice encounter about 200 meters distance to my target. This is very good. And here it is already. And now we're going to see a little bit of a montage. Okay, now that that's over with, here the hauler is again, and we have finished our long orbit around the moon, and it is time to initiate our plane change maneuver. This, of course, is ideally done at the node most removed from the periapsis, in order to save fuel, of course. Okay, now that that's done, we have to get our rendezvous and then, of course, match the velocities with the station. There we see it in the background on the left-hand side. You have seen on the right-hand side just a short glimpse of the carry hull that was zipping by as well. I really was a bit scared to kind of ram the hauler into the spine. That would have been a disaster. Okay. Okay, and now I was also a bit of, well, concerned about the docking port once again, since, well, my experience with the SSTO at the beginning of this video, you may remember. But since the spine was constructed, well, a bit more utilitarian and the docking ports kind of poke out of the main station, I thought this could be possible. And well, it certainly was. Finally, the hauler was docked to the spine. And look at that, how big that hauler really is. That's one huge freighter. Okay, the carry hull has grabbed once more another tank and is on its way down to the station on the ground. And since it is now night on the moon, or at least on the side where the rig is located, I really have to rely on the lights available. Once again, my trusty little rover, the flat badass, is grabbing the tank. There we go. Actually, I'm a bit proud of that mechanism, to be honest. It really looks cool. Okay, we're going to park that over there and then head back into orbit. If you've paying close attention to that montage before, you may have seen that I have refueled the carry hull once or twice. And yeah, I'm using the excess fuel from the spine in order to do that. What I'm doing here is parallel docking. You may have heard of parallel parking. Well, this is parallel docking. Well, not only parallel docking, it's docking in synchronicity. I brought another squid tug, if you remember, along with the hauler, and this thing here is, well, those things here are going to carry the tanks that I brought with the hauler onto the spine. So twice the tugs, twice the amount of work done in the same time, right? Actually, this looks tedious, but it really wasn't for some reason. It was actually kind of fun doing this. Look at that, the left one is a bit stuck, but the right one is sliding in nicely without me actually doing anything. Look at that. Boom, and it's stuck there. And then the other one is following suit. Okay, and then of course we have to get those tanks back onto the rig. Well, not the rig, the spine. Why am I always mixing those two up? I don't know. While I was doing this, I was kind of the mind, well, is this actually efficient? You know, I have to get the fuel from the surface to the orbit. I have to refuel the hauler, I have to get the hauler to the station, then I have to refuel the station, then I have to get the hauler back to the station in the orbit around the moon, then I have to get the tanks down on the surface, then I have to get those up again onto orbit and so on. So this is really convoluted and probably over-engineered, and I was thinking that maybe it would be cheaper and more efficient to kind of build smaller spaceships. And then it was like, nah. Okay, the two squids are once again doing their little dance around the hauler and the spine. And this is really neat. I did not plan this, but those two slid in almost at the same time. There was only just like 1 or 2 seconds delay between the first dock and the second dock. This was really cool. It's the little things that keep you happy. Okay, now those are the final tanks that I get from the hauler back onto the spine. And look at that, I'm rewarded with a nice sunrise. Oh well, once you're in orbit, it's not really a sunrise, it's more like you slide into the visibility of the sun. Takes a bit of the magic away, doesn't it? Okay, and once again, a really nice parallel docking. Boom! both tugs docked at the same time. Once again, I did not plan it this way. I just was trying to move them in similar directions, and yeah, it kind of happened. It was nice. Okay, the carry hull is once again in close vicinity of the spine and the hauler this time. What we're going to do now is doing some very important thing, which is getting the crew down to the surface. But before we can do that, of course, we have to refuel again. This is the final rest of fuel that was left in the spine. So after this, there is no more refueling the carry hull in orbit. I have to refuel on the surface only. Okay, that's done with. Now let's get that habitat. Let's get that habitat. If there's any rapper out there, maybe you could write a rhyme around that. It's kind of has a nice ring to it. Just kidding. Or maybe I'm not. Alright, back to the business at hand, which is getting the crew safely down to the surface of the moon. And there we have it. We are docking this thing to the carry hull. Boom! The squid is heading back to the spine. There we go. Docking on the center module, and we have a nice eclipse. Well, we had a nice eclipse. How do you call it? It's not a lunar eclipse, it's a curbular eclipse. Oh, well, let me know how you would call it. Okay, boom, we are on the surface, and now it's time, of course, to grab that thing. I thought, well, the usual process will work. I have designed this, haven't I? Apparently, I have designed it wrong. Look at that. I cannot get a dock with the crew module, and the entire carry hull is lifted up, so I went into desperation mode, and I tried to dock the crew module while carrying it with the carry hull. Of course, the docking port was way too high, so I thought, well, maybe I just drop it here and it would slide into place. But of course, since the surface of the moon is not completely flat, of course it did not happen that way. And then while pulling the carry hull back, I also pulled the crew module back. So yeah, this went really well, didn't it? Okay, and then another thing happened. While I tried to nudge that thing gently onto the docking port, the electricity was empty. Good thing I planned ahead and had included some fuel cells and fuel onto the rover, and already had the crew up down onto the surface. Otherwise, this would not have been possible. I would not have been able to activate the fuel cells. And then I was able to finally nudge the habitat safely. I said safely. Well, it was only one of the more decorative air intakes on the rover, so they did not have really any function, but yeah, well, I don't like it when stuff blows up. Okay, just gently nudging it, don't explode again. Okay, no explosions, this is good. Okay, so this should dock, but it doesn't, so the only thing left to do is kind of trying to lower the docking port. And in order to do that, I had to retract some of the landing gear, shift the center of mass that way, and hope that by doing this and basically wiggling the station around, a dock would engage. Now retracting, and yes! While retracting the final landing leg on the rig itself, we made a dock with the crew module. This is good. Okay, one more module left to go, so this is the final thing I'm going to grab from the station in this video. And it is the ore storage. Thing is, Those squid tugs use quite the amount of monopropellant when you want to shift those big tanks around. Unfortunately, there is not that much left after all those docking maneuvers. So I have to create some more. The Spine has its own refinery and its ore tanks, but it does not, of course, have any ore. So yeah, I need to get that ore from the surface back up again as well. But yeah, for some reason this didn't want to dock either. So fortunately I was able to get the flat badass below that tank module and just kind of gently carried it back to the base. And while performing, of course, that landing leg trick again, I tried to dock it again to the base. And yes, this was actually more of a success than I could have hoped. I actually was able to dock this thing by just removing a few of the landing legs. Funny thing was that how long those modules actually stayed sort of afloat. I was kind of expecting for them to drop down more easily, should I say. But in the end it worked out fine. And of course the station was now, well, you could say complete, because everything I need is down there. I got the crew, I got the drills, I got the refineries, I got enough tanks to store fuel, and of course the ore for spare ore storage. And yeah, so that's it for this installment for Operation Moonsucker. But we're not finished yet, of course. We have to get the fuel to the fronts, don't we? Let's see how that is going to happen. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.